Hello coaches, thanks for joining me for another Modern Soccer Coach Breakdown. There's been a ton of games from a tactical standpoint over the summer already, Copa America and the Euros. I'm going to take a look at the most common pressing system so far in both tournaments, and I'm going to break down why teams are pressing in a certain way, in this shape, in this 4-4-2 shape, and why maybe they're attacking in a different shape, what we can learn from it, what we can implement ourselves, and what we can maybe tweak to suit our players, our philosophies, and our teams. Before we start, as always, if you enjoy the work, please give it a like, please subscribe, and if you want the breakdown to this, if you want to read about it, we've got all the breakdowns on Modern Soccer Coach website for free. We've also got pre-season resources, periodization resources, all available on the Modern Soccer Coach website, modernsoccercoach.com. Link is below. Please check it out. Thanks for the support. Here we go. 4-4-2 press. All right, before we start, an important thing to establish is that just because teams are pressing in a 4-4-2 in the Euros and the Copa America, it does not mean everyone's playing in a 4-4-2 in and out of possession. And why is that important? I think it's really important because obviously tactical flexibility, you can press in a certain way and defend deeper in another way and attack in a different way as well. That's perfectly normal in today's game. But also I think this area around goal kick presses is going to start changing how we're talking about game models. Because with goal kicks, from an offensive standpoint, you're seeing more pre-planned patterns in terms of where they're putting the goalkeeper alongside defenders, where they're expecting pressure, and that takes time and setup and organization. So naturally there's going to be an offset there from a defensive standpoint that you're now seeing at the highest level, where teams are now starting to prepare specifically differently in goal kick presses than they are with run of play presses. So maybe that's something that we talk about later as the game models start to evolve. But it's good to have in mind at the highest level when we're watching these games is that, okay, the level of preparation and analysis is obviously quite high. So what are they trying to do to offset different movements that are being thrown at them from goal kick? Specifically in the 4-4-2, here we go. Okay, why would you want to press in a 4-4-2, or why do teams want to press in a 4-4-2? Well, first of all, it allows you to put immediate pressure on the centre backs, and we'll look a little bit later as to why that is so important in regards to other systems. It also allows you to deal with the 4v2 in the initial build to prevent that central penetration. So in this example, one of the number 9 steps and the other screens the number 6. And if the ball is switched, then they can just switch roles as well. The body shape's really important because sometimes you are, even though you're pressing and you're moving, you're also looking and trying to stop teams from moving behind you as well and being aware of that space. So the relationship between the two nines really, really important. One steps, the other screens is 6. One steps, the other screens is 6. And they can change as that moves over. Then the second component is the role of the outside midfielders, the 7s, 11s. They can be initially positioned on those inside channels and then they can press from out to in. And then by doing this, they can perform 3 functions. One, they can invite a pass to the fullback, which is a low value pass because you've got numbers behind the ball, make play predictable. The second one, they can screen the pass into a higher line so they can stop the pass from going into the opposition 7-11s. And then the third piece that's important for that inside channel position is that they can then deal with midfield rotations and still preserve the shape of the 4-4-2. For example, if a number 9 drops into the space from the opposition, or if they invert a player, you can just keep moving those 7s, 11s inside and give them a little bit of flexibility and they can cover that potential overload really well. The system also suits the 2 midfielders who can create a simple pressure cover balance relationship as opposition midfielders drift into pockets and start looking for the ball. Depending on the philosophy of the coach, the highest midfielder can become a marker while the covering midfielder can become a little bit more zonal. Similar to the 9's role in one covering, one dropping in the 6, the same thing happens here when the role can switch throughout the press with pressure, cover, balance if the communication and the game understanding is high. Then when you move to the back line, the advantage of the defensive line is obviously that they have a +1 initially, but they'll probably need that extra number at the back as players rotate, particularly at the highest level, into those spaces. They can also bring back number 6 into the area that's screening, who can also drop in depending on the numbers in the middle if the attacking opponents check off the line, which is freedom to be aggressive and to step rather than hold your ground and allowing players to receive and turn and then giving you a problem potentially later on. So quite a few advantages there positionally and for units and for shape by defending in a 4-4-2. But there's one more important thing to this. One of the trends that I've found really interesting, fascinating actually, in the Euros in particular, and I've written about this on my LinkedIn page where I usually do a morning view on the game tactically or something that's jumping out to me, and I've written about how teams are positioned initially in this goal kick press to stand in a 4-4-2, and just when you think that they're going to move and apply pressure, they're actually screening passes rather than going to the ball. So it's not uncommon to see a 4-4-2 press and shape that actually isn't really pressing. And I really like that because it's challenging how we think. It's not just about stepping high. It's about pressing being about the level of intensity. So is this a block shape defensively, or is this a pressing shape potentially, or is it both? And I think that's a healthy discussion to have for coaches. But I think something that's really important is the shape that allows you to do this has to be 4-4-2 and can't be something like a 4-2-3-1. And here's why. The 4-2-3-1 press has a number of advantages, but one of them definitely is not the ability to apply pressure on both centre backs. So it's good for shaping the play and moving it to one side, but you are also giving up the ability for centre backs to progress the ball by themselves. And in this picture here, as soon as one centre back is free, because of the relationship and the movement ahead of the ball, typically teams have to back off, because if they step their numbers down and space will open up higher up the pitch. So when that initial press is broken, teams have to move back 20, 30, 40 yards, and now a different type of game opens up higher up the pitch. That typically happens in a 4-2-3-1 press if the number 9 doesn't have the ability to get immediate pressure to centre backs. But the 4-4-2 is different because of that extra number higher up the pitch. So now you can stand off. Centre backs don't have that free lane if they get freed up, if they play off a 6 or off a goalkeeper and they break a press. Typically now they still have the centre forward to deal with. So now centre forwards, because of that extra number and because you're putting numbers higher up the pitch, you now can screen passes, which means ball progression and verticality can be quite difficult for a build-up team if they're unwilling to go long and play percentages perhaps. So this allows you maybe to conserve a little bit of energy as teams, and you've seen this in the Euros, are screening the ball whilst in a pressing shape. It slows the game down. Again, maybe conserves a little bit of energy. But you can only do that in a 4-4-2. And maybe that's another reason why teams are doing that with tournament schedules, heat, pressure, game conditions, all those things. Something interesting maybe to think about. So there you have it, coaches. Just some things to think about as, again, tactical evolutions. Tournaments are always the kind of marker for where we are as a culture of what we're doing tactically. So it's really good to see, again, some innovation, some different thinking. I actually think what's really interesting coming up on the horizon, perhaps tactically, is shapes are changing. Of course, that's one thing that'll continue to evolve and develop. But I also think this concept of thinking in the grey is something that maybe coach education, coach development should focus on, because now, again, you're having this, are they in a pressing shape? Are they not? So what if you're a defender who's receiving a ball from a goalkeeper expecting pressure, but that pressure doesn't arise? Is that going to offset, again, how you're going to make decisions? Is that going to make players uncomfortable? If you don't press for 3 or 4 restarts from a goalkeeper and you do press, is that kind of inconsistency? Is that going to be a variable as well that's going to throw off teams as they build? So I think the evolution of pressing is not necessarily numbers and tactics and shapes. It may just be giving teams different conditions in the build-up and asking them to solve that. Intensity, maybe time, space. But what I love about the Euros and the Copa America is the ability to say, we're going to put numbers high. And I wrote about that again this morning on my LinkedIn page. was the actual nature of these games, particularly at the end. Teams are going for it, and I know it's tournament play, and I know it's once every 4 years, so there is a lot of variables involved from that aspect. But I think as well, I don't think there's a really conservative approach from a pressing standpoint. I don't think it's conservative to stand off and screen, even if you have those numbers high, because you've already committed the numbers. So I actually think that's riskier, and I'm enjoying watching some of these shapes and how teams are trying to dictate the game without the ball. Maybe you're slowing it down because the transitions are so intense. That could be a factor as well. But always love to see where the game is going and then how that's going to impact, again, thinking as coaches and discussion as coaches. I think it's so beneficial to have these conversations with coaches groups at your club or at your college or wherever you are around, hey, what if they do this? What if we do this? A little bit of variations, a little bit different. Always intrigued by, again, new ideas and new ways of doing things. So I hope you enjoyed it. As always, appreciate you watching. Please give it a like if you haven't already, and please subscribe. I'm sure you've seen we've even invested in a new mic to make the videos even better. I got some complaints. I won't name the people who sent me messages and said the time is now. Modern Soccer Coach needs to invest in a microphone for podcast interviews and for breakdowns. And we've gone and done it. Only thing I ask in return is that you subscribe to the page. And of course, go to modernsoccercoach.com and check out the resources there as well. That'll do no harm. But thank you so much for the support, and I'll see you next week. Goodbye.